Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. Visit commandcontrolpower.com for show notes and click support to join our community for exclusive access to patron-only episodes, special features, merchandise, and other membership perks. This is Joe Saponari of CyMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. Thanks for listening.
So I forget exactly how this came up. Joe, you may remember, but we were talking about managing Synology servers and getting some sort of a dashboard or some sort of way to see all our installations to make sure that none are withering on the vine or needing updating. Do you remember this, Joe?
Yeah, so this came up when I was reading about DSM-7 when it was first public, and this was even known to people, who were testing it in the beta and the alpha probably before that. The issue was that it was just like a line, 3/4 of the way through their release notes that was like, oh, yeah, we don't do push notifications through our servers anymore. Wait, well, hold on. What did you say about that? Every Synology I install, we configure notifications so that if the thing is filling up or reporting, I/O errors, bad blocks, whatever, we find out. And so the Synology sends us an email, but it doesn't send us an email like from the Synology, from the user's own little, internet connection. It basically just relays the notification email through Synology. So it was a great service that Synology was offering where I don't need to create a mail account for each thing. I don't need to put in email credentials onto each Synology. I think it just requires a Synology account. The server has an issue. It reports it to Synology, who just relays that by email to you. I mean, it's all very seamless. I'm describing it technically, but that just went away. So like if you had notifications configured in DSM-6 and you upgraded to DSM-7, you get one final email that says, you're not going to get any more notifications. Enjoy. You can either create an email account configuration on the Synology, so you can put in, an SMTP server address and username and password, et cetera, on the Synology itself, which I didn't want to do. So I reached out on Slack to say, what are people doing about this? I figured this is a pretty big issue.
And Alex Narvi chimed in, came up with the perfect solution. And it may have existed on DSM-6, but there's something called the Central Management System. Do you know if this was on DSM-6?
Not sure. I hadn't heard about it at all. But yeah, I saw that thread where Alex popped up with that recommendation. And then you just took it and ran with it. And you started testing it and reporting back your success. It was fantastic. I want to hear more about it.
I've put so far 8 Synologies that we manage. And it was like a breath of fresh air for me because I have a couple that are installed in educational institutions. And to be honest with you, I'm supposed to look in on them at least once a month. But sometimes I forget to, or I just don't. Just something else gets in the way. They don't wither on the vine, but they certainly aren't getting the attention they should. Maybe there's a point update that it needs or something like that. Well, this is fantastic. So on your main Synology that you have in your office, you can install the Central Management System. It's baked in software to the DSM-7. Connect as an admin to all your installed base. And you have an aggregated listing, basically a single pane of glass that shows you all your servers, their health, the usage percentage, available capacity, and you could set up notifications. It's terrific. And you can remotely update. You could do DSM updates to these Synology servers remotely, and you don't even have to check in on the device.
Yeah, not having to go to each server individually and log in with the credentials for that server. It's already pre-configured. So I assume it's kind of like a client-server kind of relationship. Your main Synology, that's the controller or the main one that's getting all the updates from the other devices and relaying notifications and stuff. That one, you log into that one and you can see all the others. If you log into one of the client Synologies, you can't see anything beyond that one Synology, right? It's not like a two-way street, is it?
You mean if someone was logged in on the other side, would they see that I'm accessing it?
If somebody is logged in to client A Synology and they have access to DSM, let's say, and they're in there, could they go in and see the server that this server is reporting to? And could they see client B also reporting to that server somehow?
Oh, no, nothing like that. And when you go to each individual entry, you can actually go to the server. So right from that credential that's already pre-entered, you can just press a button that says go to server. And all of a sudden, instantly, you're brought to that DSM.
That's handy too. It's fine to fill in passwords and stuff. They're all stored in one password securely, whatever. But it's nice to be able to just like with that one click to get in, because the connection always times out when I'm waiting for something or whatever, and then I have to go back in. So it'd be nice to just have that. I got to get set up with that. That's a great answer to my my question there.
And I was saying to myself, how come I didn't know about this before?
I'm glad you tested it out for us. Alpha tested it, beta tested it, whatever it takes. And that seems like a huge improvement. And then I guess you can configure SMTP server credentials on your Synology, the one that's like I don't know what the terminology is that they use, like the reporting one, the one that they're reporting into, your Synology, basically. You'd configure your own, your credentials for that, so that, you don't even have to go and check. You know that if somebody reports an issue, client A reports into your Synology and says, I have bad blocks or something, your server is going to send you that notification through email. So that's right. The other, huge benefit of still having that like live info. So that's huge.
So most recently, I had a client come to me. They were asking me if I knew of a piece of software, preferably stealth, that could be put on company computers to monitor general use of the users on the computer. This is a real sensitive subject in our business, because if you simply take the moral and high road, you'd say, well, yes, it's a company computer, but at the end of the day, if somebody's being spied on, in this case, that's the operative word here, you should let them know ahead of time that they're being monitored. And I am not necessarily there to judge whether my client informs their employee that this is going on or not. And to be more specific, it had to do with somebody who was on family leave. They were clocking in hours remotely. It was almost impossible that this person was clocking in as many hours as they said they were clocking in. So they were asking me if I knew of anything. And off the top of my head, this is not something that's openly discussed a lot, but there are companies out there that do this. I mean, in the PC world, this is probably not that unusual, but I didn't really know of anything that worked well on the Mac platform. But I did get a referral from a very trusted source in the Mac community who gave me the name of a company called Veriato. It almost sounds like, you guys watched Silicon Valley, a couple of years back.
Aviato?
Aviato, yeah. That's what I kept on thinking of when I heard this name, Veriato, Veriato.com. And they make employee tracking software that works on the Mac very, very successfully. And the control panel's web-driven, and you put on this profile. It does what it says it can do, and it's not too cost prohibitive. I don't know the exact numbers, but the client was very, very happy. And I just wanted to get your reaction on this. And if, in fact, you were walking a mile in my shoes, whether you would have assisted the client in getting some sort of software. I didn't do the deployment. This was done by the office manager, but I said, this sounds like it's going to do what you need it to do. It comes highly recommended. So I just was wondering what your guys' thoughts were on it.
So you were colluding in the spying, but you didn't actually do the spying.
No collusion.
Right.
I was just the dealer. I didn't make them take the drugs. Right. I just facilitated the transaction. Yeah.
Right. You just made a phone call. My thinking first and foremost was screen time. The first party option is maybe the one that I would be willing to support in some way. Now, I don't know whether that's really feasible in this scenario. I don't know if like a managed Apple ID or I need some bailout from Mr. Apple over here. Can a company use Apple IDs to use screen time for any kind of monitoring at all?
That's a good question. I don't think so, though. But I see where you're going with that. Go first party. Keep it. Yeah. But I guess the only thing about that is I don't know how stealth it is if that was their intent,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We all know how corporate screen time is, how it's just more of an enterprise product too.
Right. My point in thinking of that way is that it would be still maintaining some level of privacy for the employee. I mean, everybody deserves some kind of privacy. That would be where I would come down on this. So I had this question recently from a client. It's the kind of client who oftentimes just like sends some top of mind vague poorly formed request, and I just sort of like bat it back to them like it's like a game of ping pong or something. So in this case, I said something like, we don't usually recommend software like that. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, question mark. And then I don't think they ever answered. That's why I figured it wouldn't really necessarily go anywhere. It sort of creeps me out that like an employer wants to spy on employees. I know that the goal here wasn't for me to, I'm going to take the high road and pretend, I would never do such a thing. I get the request. I get that there is a perceived need, if not a real need. It speaks to a lack of trust, right? I mean, shouldn't like...
Are we supposed to be the arbiters, philosophical arbiters of whether the employer is acting? This is dramatically different than, let's say, finding something illegal on somebody's computer, some objectionable material. I mean, this has, whether it's, Nazi propaganda or something just as bad. So who are we to be? I mean, it's great to put on our high road hat, and say, be the pious ones to say that we can't advise our client, but I would be doing them a disservice if I didn't at least come up with some sort of recommendation. That's the way I viewed it.
I got my high road hat on. I'm on my high horse. I'm high. And I'm not sure that that I can support this. It's a very good question, though. I think it's a highly relevant question because certainly a lot of employers probably have this like feeling like, I really want to know what people are doing, especially like when everybody's remote, and I want to know that they're spending like a certain amount of time in a certain app with that app frontmost or with this web page frontmost, so that I know that they're like doing something, not on YouTube or, whatever it is. So what kind of reporting does this app provide the employer? Does it take screenshots and send them over? Does it?
Yeah, they monetize it by having cost per seat, and then they sell screenshots. You can buy 50 screenshots or 250 screenshots.
That's an interesting business model. That is really, I've never heard of that. That's really crazy.
I mean, this may not be a fair analogy. It's like you paid for the bathroom fixtures, right? And the plumber comes in and he puts in he hooks up the sink and he hooks up the toilet. And then he's going to tell you, you shouldn't throw paper rolls down the toilet, but it's your toilet. And if you want to do that, you can go ahead and do it.
I'm not sure I get the analogy. But I thought you were going to say the plumber charges per flush or something like that.
But you see my point, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So my question is, does it activate the camera and the microphone?
I don't think be able to, technically.
Right.
No.
Sure, but it's corporate owned, right? Couldn't they, before they deploy the machine, they could approve, camera and microphone access, right?
Sure, but they do it before they deploy the machine, yeah.
This company, this Veriato, I'm looking at what it does, print out the tracking. It'll show the chats, email and screenshots and webmail and show all that stuff, real-time alerts if the computer's being compromised in some way. But no, it doesn't activate the microphone.
Okay. I mean, that sets my mind at ease if it can't do that. If it's not aiming to do that or adding that as a feature for extra money or something. I mean,
so are you climbing off your high horse now?
Yeah. Exactly. I'm starting to get more on your level, Jerry, down in the mud over there.
No, that's just so unfair. This is why I can't bring anything up like this on the show, because you guys are...
Well, you haven't heard me say anything yet, Jerry. So
yeah, I'm curious what you think, Sam, but I agree.
You mean Mr. Apple?
Mr. Apple.
I'm on the low horse here.
What's the party line on this?
I can go a couple ways with this, but first off, I went to the site. They do market themselves as an employee monitoring solution. So it's all out there as something maybe a company would look at and try and use. I do have my reservations as well. I mean, call me crazy, but sometimes I will judge it by the person asking, if you know what I mean. If they seem sketchy in their nature, then maybe not. But if they have a legitimate cause and they want to increase employee productivity or something, I could see it. But I'll give you for instance of something that I did turn down. I had a potential customer. They were doing therapy sessions. I'll go as far as that. And they were saying, hey, we need these cameras installed. I don't want anyone to know that they're there. I want them to be hidden. Why? No. He's like, well, we have some high profile clients and I don't want them to get worried that have cameras in the room. And I'm like,
right. So I just want to secretly record them. That's a good plan. Yeah.
That's so sketchy.
Yeah. I would never consider something like that.
I'm glad you guys have, seems like pretty good calibration of what you would and wouldn't do and what you're looking for when evaluating this kind of request. One thing that comes to mind is we have a certain allegiance to the employer in this kind of case, and if an employer is coming to us and saying, we have reason to believe we know, but we just can't yet prove, or like we have seen this, but we don't have any evidence yet, that kind of thing. And if like somebody's employment contract is some kind of thing that's like very favorable to the employee, and you have an employer who's saying like basically this person is
stealing time.
Yeah, stealing time. Like they
stealing
have this
money.
like really favorable contract. We can't touch them, but we know they're not doing right by us. Just help us essentially catch this person or gather evidence that could be presented. I understand that. And certainly, again, like within a certain very limited scope, I'd certainly be willing to entertain that. But I think that a lot of employers come to this having this general sense of like, I don't trust people. I'm going to see what everybody's really doing. That I feel like should be handled in a different way. It's not about like, let me spy on everyone and then just gather a bunch of data and like creepily watch what they're doing. Instead, I think it's, if there's a specific case, then I'd be willing to go down that road. That's not the high road.
I was very comfortable in them asking me to make a referral for the software and even a system getting it installed, maybe not surreptitiously, but if they had any technical details. And it's not a creepy request like in Sam's case. And it was presented to me as reason to believe that time was being stolen from the company. And in a very legitimate way, it was presented.
Well, Jerry, what if the request required you to go undercover? I mean, would you put on plumber uniform and go to the employee's house and prove, screen recording permissions on on this app? Or like, in all honesty, I mean, I get that. One thing you can do is just say like, here's information. The employer is looking to do this because they have reason to believe blah, blah, blah. And that meets your criteria to say, you know what, here's some information. Here's something that if you're going to do this, try this option. That's one thing. Would you, in any conceivable scenario, deploy it? Would you push out a PPPC profile that would allow a certain level of oversight? Hypothetically talk about this because I think it's a really interesting topic to consider.
So two things, like one would be to come like Jim Carrey as the cable guy and say, I'm here to fix your computer. I just need to, tweak a couple things on it. Or are you saying through Adigy, just like push it out or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just pushing it out, like deploying an app, even if it didn't have like screen recording permissions or, anything else, but if it could just like log what's happening or something.
Yeah, like this particular software by Veriato. I would probably do that if they were company-owned computers. Mm-hmm. Sure. In a stealth way, even if you didn't have a suspicion that an employee was stealing time, but the employer came to you and said, we'd like to stealthily put these on these company-owned computers, I'd probably do the job.
Interesting. It's definitely worth considering. I'd be curious to hear if listeners have really thought this through or been in this position and want to share any feedback, even anonymously. I'd certainly be very interested in this because it's, there's two kind of schools of thought. There's really like a hard line you could draw where it's like, I would never do that. I'm somewhere in the realm of where you guys are, which is there's cases where I could definitely see wanting to do the right thing and help in this case, but not as a blanket thing. Like for all employees, we spy on you. That's a known thing. It's fine for employees to assume that it's a company-owned machine. The boss could do that, but it's another thing to say that's our policy or our practice.
If you think about, let's say, large corporate environments, there's an expectation level that you are being watched, so to speak. I'm sure you have to sign some paperwork to that degree as well. But I guess if you sign into a job like that, you're expecting that behavior. And then it's not so crazy that someone found out you were doing something you shouldn't have been. Because it's like, well, yeah, sure. They're going to see everything you do. If you look at it that way, that's an expectation. And if you look in a small business, like let's say 20 people, and everyone's an admin on their computers and all that stuff, then it's not an expectation. And I'm starting to think this through as I'm saying this. What's the difference in a way? I still have my reservations personally about doing something like that, but I'm also trying to think, what is the difference? You expect it in a large company. What if a small-time boss wanted to see that stuff? Why is that worse?
Yeah, I jumped on a computer after talking to like an office admin just earlier today to, help somebody configure a calendar and whatever. Our point of contact there, I was on the phone with them and they said, yep, you can hop on that machine. And so I did that. And, I just happened to notice the person was on YouTube and it was like another tab. They jumped back and forth to this tab and they probably like rewinded it or something. And they were maybe just listening to something on YouTube while they were working. I didn't sit there and like watch them work and see what they were doing. It's the kind of thing where people should just self-censor in a certain way. Like employees, if you want to listen to a podcast while you work, great, that's fine. As long as you're productive, if it's affecting your job performance, then that's the other measure. I don't think the solution in that case is like, well, it looks like you had this many hours of streaming audio on YouTube or something. Like it should be more like performance based if there's any kind of evaluation that's happening there.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Like, I would be fine if an employee was listening to podcasts all day long, especially if it was ours, but they still got their job done.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. But employees should assume that their company is watching everything. They signed the end user license agreement, so to speak. It's like it probably should be in an employment contract. If it's not, we have the right to like spy on you. We own this computer. We control everything that happens on it, just as a blanket statement. But that doesn't mean that the company should do it or would do it. It just means that the employee should probably like assume that that's happening. So, if you have to, like you have to, and you're probably covered.
I had a customer that it was a personal customer, but he worked for a large hedge fund. When we were about to start working with them, he busted out like this, or his assistant, I should say, this whole big contract that said if we use our computers on their network, they have the right to look through everything on our systems. Yeah, no, there's no freaking way that is ever going to happen. We ended up still working with them because they took that clause out, but they were trying to just throw that in there. At any time, we can confiscate your computer and look at it. It's like, that's crazy.
That is crazy. And I wonder how many people have signed that. I mean, that's the kind of thing where you just hope with a major company like Apple, everybody all day is clicking through like, I agree, whatever, just get me the latest download. You hope that by crowdsourcing, people are figuring out if they ever introduce some kind of really egregious clause like that. Who reads most of this stuff anyway? Even as an employee or contractor, you have to really scrutinize it.
Nobody reads that crap, man.
Well, speaking of like privacy and security and stuff, I had a client ask me something that I wanted to kind of get your guys' take on. Deleting messages. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I keep messages, and I suspect you guys do too. I'd rather have the data myself than delete everything that comes in. And once in a while, though, I see that people have different habits than I do. So I'm talking about the Messages app on the Mac and iPhone and whatever. These obviously sync. If you turn on Messages in iCloud, they can sync pretty reliably between devices. If you don't have that feature turned on, they probably match for the most part. But if a device is offline for an extended time, you might not backfill those missing messages and things that didn't come into that device. You've got Messages in iCloud and everything syncing, including deleted messages, which is a great feature that obviously when you turn this on, you probably want to inform people about, because sometimes people might be keeping everything on their Mac but deleting stuff from another device. Same thing with photos. If you turn on iCloud Photos, you've got to tell people, don't prune your photo library using your phone because you're trying to save space in your phone, because that's going to delete it everywhere. You kind of want to inform them that deletions also sync. And that's kind of exactly what I'm wanting to talk about here. I have a client who has everything Apple wants them to have. He has an iPad, an iPhone, a Mac, and a watch. He has Messages in iCloud turned on all the devices. And I get a couple emails from him saying, I forget how he put it, but clients have the funniest ways of referring to this sometimes. Like, I've got a gremlin in my messages or something. And then he's talking about zombies and things. So basically he's saying that I delete all my messages. He showed me a screenshot of his Mac with 4 threads, 4 messages threads in it. Same thing on his phone. And he's found that like he could delete a message thread on one device. And, it's usually going to delete from all of them, but occasionally it doesn't delete from one of the devices. So he's been troubleshooting himself by signing out or signing in or like turning off. In the case of the watch, he thought it was related to the watch. So he like reset the watch and reconfigured it. But he still seems to have this general sense that it's not totally reliable. And my question is, I don't know how well it works in practice, because I don't have anybody that's doing this. That's deleting messages en masse and expecting them to sync the deletions to all devices. So I'm curious on this specific case, like, have you guys dealt with this before, and does this generally work? I know it should work in theory, but does it work in practice? These kinds of issues in general, can you think of any others that relate to this, where somebody has their own workflow that's totally supported, but just not very common, and it's kind of hard to advise them on that?
Just so I understand it, Joe, are you talking about just he's on his phone, he's just kind of sitting there looking through stuff and just deleting messages, and he's expecting them to delete everywhere else, including his Mac and everywhere? That deletion is not syncing specifically. Specifically,
right? The deletion is not syncing. That's right.
You're asking my experiences, because I do that every once in a while, especially when I do like the delete and report as junk, which only seems to be a feature on the phone, not on the computer, when you get like a junk message. But anytime I've ever had to delete, they do synchronize that deletion. I do think that I almost every time initiate that deletion from the phone, though. but I have not seen an issue where it just doesn't go away, like the gremlins that are attacking his computer.
Right, exactly. Well, another thing just occurred to me too, which is that sometimes I have a message that appears as unread, on one device only. So it's not syncing unread. And it seems like usually it's a text message, an SMS message, as opposed to an iMessage. Generally those sync, but it seems like sometimes I'll reply to a text message from my phone, and like the message, the original text message still, shows as unread on my Mac, for example. So I guess I've noticed that can happen. So I mean, it's just typical. I was going to say typical Apple cloud services, just general. It's like 90% reliable. But I don't want to be too cynical about that, because I think their services have gotten way better in the last few years. Okay, that's an interesting data point, that when you do delete, it does seem to sync the deletion.
I have clients who should actually delete their messages that don't. I can think of an example where I had this business owner, and he had to have his Mac Mini server signed in with his Apple ID. And so, like you said, everything syncs. And, I just happened to unwittingly see personal texts that were going back and forth that should have been deleted. But no, I've actually backed into this.
Everyone form a mental model right now about what that was. That's good.
Oh my gosh, it was horrible. So I've had clients actually say to me, and I've reversed into this situation where they're not finding consistency across their devices with the messaging not quite in sync or in lockstep. Mm. For the life of me, I've tried to solve these things for the client on site, and I can't get them to match up. And I tell them, well, from this point forward, everything should still be in sync. But the stuff that's retro, I don't think so. But like you said, I chalk it up to Apple services kind of working, but not working, almost in the same way that you take a photo and sometimes on your phone, and it immediately appears in the Photos app on your Mac. And other times you have to promise it a beer and it still doesn't show up. You're waiting and waiting and waiting. And the client's like, how come it's not syncing? And you're like, well, it'll be there. Don't worry. It'll show up. Usually this is when you're saying like, look, I fixed the syncing now. See, we'll take a picture of these pencils on your desk. Okay. Give me your phone. All right. We've taken a picture of your pencils. All right. Now watch. We're going to open up Photos. Watch. Here it comes. Here it is. Any second now, you're going to see it. It's going to
and
just
then you
show
start
up.
Explaining, right? It's like, well, usually it syncs, but sometimes, and it's like, yeah,
Exactly.
you're like sweating. Yeah, you got flop sweat. Yeah.
Right. But I have to ask, what's this guy doing that he keeps on?
I don't know.
Messages. Oh my God.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Like I've never really been in that scenario. Some people are just paranoid, and they probably read one too many stories about how like somebody's messages ended up in court over something, and like they figure like keeping as little as possible. And I don't blame them for that, but from my perspective, I'd rather have the info myself. There's nothing that's nothing incriminating. It's just it's great for reference. Like I search messages sometimes and find stuff I'm looking for.
I guess it matters how many exes you have. If you have a few ex-wives or ex-husbands around, and probably deleting all this stuff is probably a good idea.
If you've been through a subpoena in court, and like had all this stuff go, like, yeah, sure. I mean, I guess you go through that. It is interesting, like the example you gave about photos, because I've been down that road with a couple clients as well, where they tell me like my photos aren't syncing. And then I explain like, well, you're going to have to make sure this is plugged in and make sure it's, in the case of the laptop, like it's only going to sync when it's plugged into power and the screen is open. And, in the case of the phone, like it's got to be on Wi-Fi and it has to be plugged into power also, but not necessarily, but like usually. And then like you ask for screenshots, like show me what you're seeing, because I want to know that what number is it at, because it actually says it's updating. I know it hasn't happened as quickly as you would like, but I think it's making progress. So then you ask for screenshots and it's like, it's a whole process. But a lot of times it does just look like gremlins. It's not working. We don't know why. And that's as good as it's going to get sometimes.
How about on the attachment side, though? Do you ever see, like, especially on the Mac side, do you see attachments just taking up mass amounts of space that it caused any space issues for your users?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And messages. Yeah. I've seen that. Optimize iCloud storage. Does that help with the attachments and messages? I think it would. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so too.
You do? I thought it was like meant for like duplication efforts and stuff.
I mean, of course, on the phone, like sometimes you'll have the suggestion to delete attachments. You can go into your phone storage and they'll make recommendations there, which is great. And that makes sense in those cases, because like if somebody is sending a movie back and forth through messages, like there's no reason it has to sit in messages. You should, if you want to put it in your photo library, great, and keep it forever there, and then it'll be optimized out of your device, naturally. So
people hang on to those by tooth and nail. the 25-minute video of their grandchild on the tricycle. Like,
Right.
we could just move this to photos. It'll be much better there.
Exactly.
No, I like it. I like it.
You know what's been great, though? I've noticed in the latest, at least, I don't know when this came out in Monterey, and I think it's also on the iPhone, but it'll suggest that you add things like that to your library. When you're browsing your photos on your device, those photos will show up, things that people have sent you. I don't know if it's everything you've been sent or just like from family members or what it is. It'll show you photos that people have sent you. It'll show them in the slot where they would be in your photo library, but it gives the option to like save the shared photo or, item.
I haven't seen that.
It's cool. I just noticed it recently. It's a really nice feature. I'm like, I don't have this photo. I want this photo. Something Ashley sent me or whatever.
I'm looking for that feature right now. Like if you hover over it in Messages on the Mac?
No, like if you're in your photo library, if you're in your Photos app on your Mac or on your iPhone, I just noticed this recently because I happened to be just browsing through like the library, like swipe, and then a banner at the top said something like save shared photo or something. It was like, it turns out it was something Ashley sent me by Messages.
Gotcha.
That's pretty cool because otherwise that stuff does just sit in Messages and oh yeah, there's that photo, and it's a great suggestion. It's one of the few wins that I've seen recently with technology. Like there's been so many annoying fails. Like I've been pretty disenfranchised about technology lately. I mean, one thing we had was like I sent out my newsletter advising clients like, okay, Monterey hit 12.2 and it seems pretty good. And everybody, you can feel free to upgrade now. And like for prime clients, we'll plan your upgrade. You can let us know if we'll unblock it for you if you want. And then like a week later, 12.2.1 comes out and says like, yeah, there was a bad 0 day. And I'm like, all right, great. I just like recommended everybody go to 12.2. Fine. You just can't win sometimes. I feel like sometimes we're just patching bugs all day long. It's just so frustrating sometimes.
Joe unsubscribed me because I had signed up for Joe's newsletter a couple months back and I got one and I was commenting on the show how much I liked it. And
wait, I didn't subscribe you. Really?
No, I didn't get your upgrade to Monterey because I would have done that.
You would have taken my advice on
You would have upgraded?
Yeah.
Nice.
No, I did not get that. So something's funny.
I'll look at it. You probably unsubscribed or maybe went to your junk or something like that.
Are you kidding me?
Just install this spyware and I'll check it out for you.
It's pronounced Aviato, Joe.
Nice.
I'll have to use one of those hide my email addresses to sign up for Joe's newsletter so he doesn't know it's me.
Oh, man.
Perfect.
I'll just check the spyware that I have on your computer and I'll look for your IP address. I'll figure it out.
You have to expect that when you work with SciMac.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Did you read your contract? So I got a quick tip for you guys. I'm not usually the one that brings new software to the table, but I'm sure we've all had a need for this. Wake on LAN, basically being able to send that magic packet that tells a Mac to wake up if it's sleeping, as long as it has some kind of network connection. Most modern Macs can be woken up even when they're sleeping. It used to be a feature of like more high-end stuff, and it had to have an Ethernet connection and stuff. And now many Macs do support Wake on LAN. There's no built-in way to wake another Mac from your Mac. There's no like command line built in for it. Like I always kind of thought this could be built in, almost like, you can ping a remote device. You can use the ping command. Like why isn't Wake on LAN a built-in command? So I've looked into it a few times over the years and it always seemed like all the options I could find were paid options. You'd have to either get them from the Mac App Store or you have to pay for the app, or there were some annoying hoops I had to jump through where I never really made it work. I had a need for this recently. I had some Macs that were in the office. I'm not in the office, I'm remote. And I wanted to finish them up after Tim had left for the day so that I could let the client pick them up the next day. By the time I went to work on them, the Macs had gone to sleep. They were plugged into power and they had a network connection on Wi-Fi. Very recent MacBook Airs. I started looking to Wake on LAN. Actually, the first thing I tried was I'm able to remote into another Mac in my office. And I've had some cases where I could use screen sharing to do this. I don't know if you guys have seen this tip or tried this before. Yeah. So if I'm local, if I'm on the network, then I can try to connect using screen sharing, whether by IP address or I'll see the machine in the little network browser and I can just click share screen. And that's oftentimes enough. I'll get the password prompt to connect. And then I might even see it light up in TeamViewer or can connect a different way. And I've used that before and that's worked. In this case, it did not work. And so I thought, okay, well, Wake on LAN, that's a good option. Let me see if I can try that. So I just did some quick Googling and I found a really good option. So it's called Mini Wake on LAN, or Mini WOL. It's by a guy named Hans at tweakingforall.com. So tweaking and the number 4 all.com. And it's free. So the great thing is that oftentimes I might have a connection to a remote Mac on the remote side, but I don't want to like necessarily buy an app, just for this purpose, or install an app and license it if I already own it. I don't want to bother with the Mac App Store, and all that stuff. So this is just a quick, easy, fast download. All I had to do is provide the IP addresses. So it lives in the menu bar. You go in there and you just, you can configure it from there. You add, in this case, I had 3 Macs. I added the IP addresses of all 3 Macs. I clicked the button that just basically sends the magic packet to all 3 Macs. And they all woke up and I was able to connect to them remotely. And it was perfect. It saved the day and it's freeware. There's literally a little button there that lets you buy Hans a cup of coffee, whatever donation you want to send over. So I bought him a cup of coffee and I thought this is a great thing to have in our tool belt, that it's a free app you can download in a pinch. And if it works, go ahead and send him some money.
Nice, dude. That's cool. I like that.
When I can meet a need for a client with some free tool, I mean, that's pretty cool. So I definitely had to show my support there.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it